Well, hello, that's me again, and it is the 16th of July, and I wanted to close or make the conclusion to my Wunderwaffisch thinking videos, which is, today was supposed to be the third conclusive part of it, with something else. What I'm about to do instead of what I'm about to do. But I have to admit that I do receive many emails and messaging through Patreon and through my blog, and believe me, a lot, many people. And most of them are good people. I mean, they are not only good people, they are people who try to break through this vicious circle of propaganda and outright lies and, BS, which is surrounding the special military operation of Russia in Ukraine. And those who follow me and follow basically what I do, they probably saw this morning Pacific time. For somebody it would be evening, for somebody else midday. Wonderful roundtable organized by Gonzalo Lira, and it was Larry Johnson, Alexander Mercouris, and me. And Gonzalo, obviously, we've been talking about the whole situation surrounding this special military operation and about the basically utter debacle which is coming for the combined West. But people sent me this message, so to speak, many times already. And the last one was, I believe, day before yesterday, or probably a couple of days. And people who watch my videos, they will know who they are. So I'm not going to be obviously telling their names, but if somebody really wonders if it is true or not, I can, if somebody asks the question, I will show the print screen of this message, obviously with the sort of blackened, so to speak, erased name of the sender. And the reason was I was asked to do this is because they pointed out to me to this site. I never went there, so I looked at this site. It is Blinkov's Battlegrounds, and I have no idea who or this Blinkov guy is, or maybe a combination of guys, but they specifically pointed me out to this video, which is called "Why is Russian Air Force Performance in Ukraine so abysmal?" I was like, okay, well, there are many people around right now who definitely are using this hype of the special military operation to monetize themselves and sell a lot of bullshit. Actually, 99.9% of this is bullshit under the title of military analysis, but mostly it's nothing more than collection of random shots or pieces of video about some shit being blown out and some other things, and they presented discussing, which I call the, technological masturbation to all kinds of those gizmos, the javelins, those howitzers, those Su-25s or Su-57s and things like that. And I get it, hey, make no mistake, but as I already stated, majority of those people who do that, overwhelming majority, they don't have any real military background. They might have some technological background, like have undergraduate degree in some aeronautical engineering or something like that, but for the most part those people have no clue what operational matters are. They don't, even tactically they don't understand what it is, because, for example, the number of the tactical issues are covered by the documents, both in the United States and in Russia, for example, some of which are not only for your eyes only, so to speak, or for service usage, so to the SPA known in Russian, but they are actually secret and top secret. And of course, we're talking about the category of the public, which is not even those, pardon me, I mean, make no mistake, I have no, condescending or contemptuous attitudes towards that. But what I'm saying, what Grant knows and what cadre officer knows, especially the officer with their initial staff positions for, say, the units or formations such as battalion, let alone regiment, let alone brigade, well, that is different because, yeah, they don't teach that. And most of it is actually quite secret, classified. You need to have special forms. Like I had Form 1A access, when I was serving and I was studying in Naval Academy. So this is all serious. These are not things which are built around some, publicly known technical data, which you can make conclusions upon it. Because wars obviously are not fought as majority of the general public thinks. But so I went out and looked up this Blinkov's background. There's nowhere to be found who he, she, or they are. I found this, and as you can see yourself, it's all those fanboys type things, with all those funny videos, about technology, and as I already stated, technological masturbation on all kinds of weapon systems. But as you might expect, when I started, because people ask me to listen to Mr. Blinkov's video about Russia's Air Force abysmal performance, I was obviously surprised, and there are few points which I have to make basically for you guys, not just to rebut this Mr. Blinkov or whoever, again, whatever that thing is, especially its wonderful Russian accent. I don't know if it's really Russian, it could be Ukrainian, or it could be Bulgarian for all I care. But for the most part, yeah, I found his videos being absolutely amateurish, sophomoric BS, being sold to all kinds of the excited fanboys, primarily from gaming community, and who watch too much Top Gun as some kind of analysis. It is obviously not an analysis, certainly not an analysis of the performance of the Russian Air Force in Ukraine. And while one may make a very justifiable argument towards me saying, you know what, you are not Air Force, you have never been Air Force. I agree, I am not Air Force, I don't know how to fly combat aircraft, I don't know what buttons to push. Put me in the goddamn cockpit of a Su-25, I will crash without even, going off the ground on the takeoff. So, no, I'm not talking about it. But what I do have, and I do have background, it's in operations. I have a background in tactics, and again, as I already stated, I have a graduate degree which amounts to graduate degree of how to sink the United States Navy. And the United States Navy obviously had a lot of aircraft on their aircraft carriers, and that was the part of the curriculum, and that was the part of the training which I received. So, and I started listening to this Mr. Blinkov guy, and I recognized that, yeah, I need to make a video, that people who ask me to make a video about it, they need to, I have to satisfy their desire to talk about it. And so here I am, talking about Mr. Blinkov and his video about why Russian Air Force performed per Mr. Blinkov and per his audience, which is primarily illiterate on all matters, very abysmally in accordance to him. So, and I started that few things which needs to be pointed out to Mr. Blinkov's so-called analysis. There are some outright lies in this analysis, so to speak. But I will start with the simple thing that which really catches your, so to speak, ear, if you wish. And it is the fact that Mr. Blinkov states that, and he states it a lot, which it sounds like, in accordance to US intelligence. I'm not going to be beating around the bush here, and fact is, most of what I write in my life, including books which are fairly famous, especially in professional communities, I write trying to avoid any kind of the US or Western intelligence assessment, especially since my desire not to do it, or rather avoid it, is completely confirmed by recent admissions by, let's say, hey, NBC News and people of other mainstream media networks, who obviously stated that basically everything that we know most of it anyway, is practically made up. CIA was making up information. A lot of American, think tanks just making up information about specifically special military operation of Russian armed forces in Ukraine. And as they say, to mess with Putin's mind. The guys are obviously very incompetent, because obviously I can tell you from the get-go, GRU and SVR's analytical institutions and analytical organizations are probably head and shoulder better above whatever CIA or whoever wants to present their intel, so to speak, to American political class. And Russians are simply better aware tactically and situationally about what is going on there, and certainly that is the reason I am not taking seriously pretty much most of what U.S. intelligence says, unless I know that it's verifiable, it's corroborated by several sources, and you can say, oh yeah, that sounds about right, So, and then again, I never pretend that I know things. I always on record that, guys, I'm just a civilian person now who makes his living providing some insights and maybe some analysis, but I definitely do not do anything and do not come to the conclusions, complete conclusions, until I have all available verifiable data, and usually there's verifiable data on all kinds of the huge military affairs, huge military events, such as, let's say, special military operation, which Russian forces are conducting, or let's say first Gulf War or second Gulf War. They all require the real professional and verified and corroborated assessment. And that is why when I hear that Mr. Blinkov says that in accordance to US intelligence, I'm sorry, dude, this is the intelligence which gave us Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, and which told you that actually Russia is going to run out of the standoff weapons in like 3-4 weeks after the start of operations. Well, guess what? 48 calibers just flew yesterday into the Odessa-Nikolaev region. So I'm not going to be concentrating on this, but that already tells you that Mr. Blinkov has some issues with understanding what is this all about. But the other thing which is, of course, Mr. Blinkov uses to state that the Russian Air Force is performing abysmally in Ukraine is the fact that he is using, drum roll, still drumming and rolling, and you of course guessed it, he uses the Gulf War and Desert Shield and Desert Storm and 2003 invasion of Iraq as the benchmark. I want to say immediately, once you hear the guy who does this and tells you that, oh, let's compare what coalition forces did in Iraq, let's say in 1991, with what Russia and Russian Air Force specifically is doing in Ukraine right now, so you can immediately close the video or just don't talk to those people. They are full of shit. So they are basically amateurs who do not understand what they're talking about. Why I'm saying this? Because obviously, as I already stated, the main concern here is not just the technology. And I would dare to say that Mr. Blinkov has no idea what he is talking about, but let me introduce to him to some people from the very high-ranking CIA people, and I know some of those people, for example, personally. I'm not going to tell you who all those people are, but some of them I know personally, and I know their connections, and I know their level they operate. And allow me to present to you with this quote. This quote was completed in 2018 after a disasters for Tomahawk salvos against Syrian air defense, which shot down, I believe, 79 out of 103 Tomahawk missiles using actually Panzer and good old Book M1s, of course, which was a disaster. And here's the quote. Here's how it sounds. Read it attentively. I will read it for you. I understand the reluctance of the US military leaders to admit the truth about this debacle. it would undermine the confidence of the American people in our supposedly invincible weapon systems and would embarrass and enrage the man-child that inhabits the White House. He was talking about Trump. Better to tell him lies and let him believe the fantasy, but this is a very dangerous game. So far, the Russians have not pursued significant PR efforts to expose the US lie about their missiles. Maybe they are choosing to keep it quiet, like a good poker player, and not tip their hand to the American public. One of these days, Trump and company will overbet in trusting the Russians not to punch back and punch back hard, and the American people will be in for a rude awakening. They will discover that the Russians have a decided advantage over us when it comes to air defense. A friend of mine who has expertise in these matters wrote to me, any air defense engineer with security clearance that isn't lying through his teeth will admit that Russia's air defense technology surpassed us in the 1950s and we've never been able to catch up. The systems they have in place surrounding Moscow make our Patriot 3s look like a fucking Nerf guns. Finally, there is a matter of Russians as a second-rate military masquerading as a world power. Another friend who has spoken to military commanders in the CENTCOM told me, all of the knowledgeable aircraft commanders are usually scared shitless about the prospect of a legitimate air-to-air skirmish with Su-30 or any Russian air superiority fighter. Well, I would say that this guy who said it is already stated. I can confirm his credentials, and in this particular case, I would take his word over Mr. Blinkov and whoever operates behind him anytime, because I know his competencies, I know his rank, I know what he was doing in life. So yeah, and when he says that, yeah, he talks to people in the CENTCOM and they confirm that. So yeah, that's pretty much already throws away all this bravado and bullshit about comparing whatever the operations United States Air Force, for example, or for that matter British Air Force were doing in the Iraq. And do not forget what Iraq is. It was before, under Saddam, it is third world Arab country, and that's theater of operations, which was happening, on which all this whole Desert Shield and Desert Storm was happening, is much smaller than what is happening now in Ukraine. But apart from this, obviously, we're not going to be talking about this provided without any reference to any kind of credible source by Mr. Blinkov, and we will talk to actually let our Iraqi people talk to us in person. Look at that attentively. This is the document which was extracted on the 5th of November of 1991, the year of the role of the Iraqi Air Force in the Gulf War. And it was the actual Iraqi own assessment of the Air Force and actually air defense against the coalition. You know what, for any professional, and especially a professional who has degree in, especially graduate engineering degree, especially in weapon systems and their integration, it is a really sad report, because basically what you read there, you read about the technology of 1950s with those wonderful, make no mistake, wonderful, but when they are obviously in the good hands, technology of such as S-75 or S-125 air defense systems, which are, how to put it, already by 1991 were obsolete. And I mean obsolete like by a huge margin. And despite the fact that France was trying to provide some kind of the integration to Iraqi air defense, any coalition fighter, which there were some fighters lost, obviously, inevitably somebody gets shot down, it's inevitable. But basically by D+3, day 3 of the operation of Desert Storm, it was pretty much over for air defense of Iraqi air defense, and of course Iraqi Air Force basically pretty much was wiped off the from the skies, and some of it just basically escaped to Iran, for example. So yeah, it's kind of tells you a little bit, not to mention the fact that prior to this, the bombing and suppression of the Iraqi air defense was ongoing for quite some time, months really, and coalition was allowed to, just quietly assemble this force for 5 months basically, and then just basically start finishing off rather inept and very unprofessional Iraqi army. How do I know that? Well, Mr. Blinkov, of course, will not tell it to his audience because it's difficult. It's really boring. It's tedious. You need to, basically browse through hundreds and hundreds of pages of text, tables. You will need some formula to, you'll need to use some operational constants to figure this out. But I will help in this case for people who still think that you can actually compare the operations of Russian Air Force and, for example, coalition Air Force, because we can open this famous paper. It's Burke Chair in Strategy, Arlie Burke Chair in Strategy of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which was first actually published by Anthony Cordesman, the leader of this group who was preparing the assessments. And it was published in 1994, I believe. It was revised in July 2013, and it is called Lessons of the Gulf War of 1990-1991. So, and immediately what has to be pointed out, when you look at the, for example, own Iraqis documents, and of course when you look at this wonderful document, many hundreds of pages, 280 or something like that, I don't remember precise number, I remember I had to read it just to kind of take it in to figure out, what was going on there. I can tell you immediately, when you have air defense which has primarily S-75, it's S3, I believe, Goa, and S125, and you have like quadrat systems, all of which were obsolete not just by 90s, they were obsolete by 80s, then what do you expect? And you expect the Air Force, which doesn't fly, and most of it was destroyed anyway prior to this. So you have to understand that basically there's something wrong with this comparison. The benchmark is so low that even Cordesman and the group who wrote it, they admit it. Not only they admit it, you need to read tens of pages which make those conclusions. Many of those conclusions are absolutely valid and they are professional. Obviously, it was written and compiled in 1994 when the United States Armed Forces and even political leadership of the United States were people who were more or less competent. They could understand things. So, and let's take a look what we have here. What we have here is this. Let me open it and let's read from some things which are contained in this wonderful document. You can easily actually upload it or download it from the internet, and here are things which you need to consider when you begin to compare Russian and coalition campaigns. Here it is. As you can see yourself here, which is underscored or underlined in red, you can see that basically just the 35th Tactical Fighter Wing, which was the main Wild Weasel formation firing the HARM, high speed anti-radiation missile, fired 905 missiles and recorded 254 radars destroyed for a 28% success rate. Because obviously at that time they were using kind of the many missiles, HARM missiles, which didn't have this ability to shoot at the target already radar, which have been switched off, but still, they already destroyed 254 radars. And basically, that's what the conclusion is. For example, it was this online kill capability to use anti-radiation missiles to suppress Iraqi radars rather than the physical destruction of Iraq's surface-to-air missile units and radars that did the most to make Iraq ground-based air defenses ineffective. This success is measured in figure 6.4 and other tables you can find in this document, and it is clear that Iraq's entire sensor system was crippled by D+3. Coalition aircraft acquired virtual sanctuary at altitudes above 10,000 feet. Okay. So we have basically a complete suppression of the Iraqi air defense, which was, all things considered, very easy for two fundamental factors. And remember, I once referred you to the article by the Colonel Norval Atkin, and you can look it up. It's somewhere in one of my medias. If need be, I can always give it a link in my community. It's the fact that actually the title of the article, and it has nothing to do with racism or, but it's very correct. Why Arabs lose the wars. And we are talking about the very inefficient, very badly educated, sometimes illiterate Iraqi army trying to operate even obsolete Soviet systems. Of course, they were suppressed. To also demonstrate you to what degree it was suppressed, here it is. Look at this about this radar guidance. Nevertheless, the coalition was scarcely able to ignore such systems. Of course, Air Vice Marshal William Ratton, the British Deputy Commander and Air Commander of the Gulf Force, summarized the strengths and weakness in the Iraqi ground-based air defense system as follows. They, the Iraqis, were far less efficient in using their radar-guided missiles because they chose not to hold the radar guidance on our aircraft for a sufficient length of time. Yeah, rather they would switch it on initially and then barrage fire radar-guided missiles and then switch the radar guidance off. So in effect, the missiles were ballistic, which is rather wasteful and totally inefficient. At some point of time, they refused to turn the radar at all. So, well, if you call this serious air defense, I'm sorry guys, this is not how it works. Even in the radar-guided missiles, well, ask Serbian colonel, who in 1999 beautifully shot down the F-117 stealth fighter. So it depends on the combat readiness, and it depends on many other factors and operational factors, which I'm not going to be discussing right now. But Mr. Blinkov loves to compare this to Iraqi and to Iraqi campaigns of the Allied forces. And let me tell you, so as one American general stated, the worst thing which could have happened to us was the ease with which we defeated Iraqi, which created the basically case of the being totally unaware of the real war. And if you read this wonderful document, you will see yourself, on many occasions they discuss this, and people who discuss it, obviously, they are way more competent than Mr. Blinkov, and they use appropriate, data on war correlates, which demonstrate to you how different, actually, when you begin to compare to what a Russian Air Force faces in Ukraine, the whole affairs are. And let me tell you why. For starters, if you look at the air defense of Ukraine, which was being configured not less by NATO, and when you even consider such clown as David X, he is, for some reason, he passes for the military analyst in Forbes and National Internet, kind of American tabloids. But even he, the guy who absolutely is just, he has no clue what he's writing about. He once was concussed in Afghanistan, but again, for the most part, the guy actually does comics and, writes some pop, military books or what have you. But look at this. Even this guy shows us. Look at this. Ukraine is losing several S-300 anti-air launches a week, but it still has hundreds left. Well, what do you know? Why it is important? Look what even this guy writes on April 8th. Ukraine had around 100 active batteries of S-300 long-range air defense systems with as many as 300 launchers. It's actually more than that, because Ukraine, unlike Iraq, which had nothing of like, also had actually the very significant numbers. Still does some. It's a book M1. And these are very capable systems, even despite the fact that they nearing, and they're pretty old ones. But Ukrainian air defense, several orders of magnitude, both quantitatively and qualitatively, it was larger and better than whatever coalition faced in Iraq. Another way to put it politely, for example, even Russian Air Force and Russian intelligence organizations, they really didn't know exactly if those S-300s, which use standard missiles, which are semi-active radar homing, that means you need to eliminate the target by radar, which could be actually in a different place than your launchers. If Ukraine at this time have been able to update some of the missiles to the full shoot and forget, that means active radar homing. That's what, for example, Russians use in their latest air defense complexes, starting from S-300 PMU and obviously S-400 and other types. And this is totally different. And here's the issue. The reason Iraqis were missing, because yeah, obviously they haven't been able to illuminate the missiles. But when you have the missiles which are shoot and forget, the only thing you need in this particular case for developing of the firing solution or the launch data, if you wish, you need the 1 or 2 smears by radar to fix the azimuth, initial azimuth, and then shoot into the vicinity. Granted, you understand the elements of the movement of the target, where the active radar homing device will capture the target. There are all indications that Ukrainians had that missiles too. So, and when you look at this, it's like, are they really reasonable or justifiable comparisons? Not at all. You are talking about what turns out to be today, absolutely, crucially, the best proxy United States ever had. And for example, if Mr. Blinkov did know, all practically Nazi regiments and battalions or brigades which were actually fighting, most of them now destroyed and annihilated, are actually, they have been equipped and had the gear primarily from NATO. They didn't have any Russian gear, they didn't have anything like that. So that tells you something. And then, of course, I don't know if Mr. Blinkov told to his audience, but it was confirmed by Russia and Russian forces that even Link 16 devices have been detected and actually captured by Russian forces from the Ukrainian command and control centers, which also, of course, tied to the air defense complexes of Ukraine. So United States won't do better than Russian Air Force. In fact, I would say that United States Air Force shouldn't face the actual Ukrainian air defense which Russia faced. It would have been into huge troubles. The reason I'm saying this, and again, Mr. Blinkov don't tell this to his audience, is the fact that people who actually have an understanding what is this all about, even they, in May, write in the War on the Rocks that would we do better? Hubris and validation in Ukraine. And the question is very legitimate, and actually the answer is pretty self-evident. No. And fact is, I'm on record, United States is not even configured to fight against the war which Russia fights now. And again, Ukrainian armed forces, VSU, and Nazi regiments are the best proxy in history the West ever had. They were for 8 years prepared, equipped, and trained to find Russian armed forces, including Air Force and, penetrate air defense and things like that. They failed miserably. And the question is actually that Russian Air Force now has a complete preponderance in the air. All those random 2-3 sorties by another supplied Su-25 or Su-24 by Ukrainian Air Force are immediately stopped and the airplane shut down. So Blinkov doesn't talk about it, but here it is, you see, and this is just the start of the, deconstructing of Mr. Blinkov ideas about air war. But we're not going to stop here. Mr. Blinkov also, for some reason, concludes, I don't know why, that actually and again, he produces there, I believe, numbers from 2012 or 2013 about number of hours Russian Air Force flies, the pilots and the crews fly. He says it was 120 or 130. Well, the problem, of course, is today is 2022. But because we don't have data, and that is why I never speak about this completely, like say, oh yeah, that's conclusively. No, I say, the operation develops this way and we can look it up, on this vector, on that vector. But truth is, we can take the numbers from 2021 and we can take the numbers of the flying hours very easily from people who command Russian aviation, either as a whole or the very important, subdivisions, so to speak, branches of it, such as, for example, let's take 2021 flight hours of the Russian military transport aviation, which by all measures is much smaller, of course, than the total of Russian Air Force, but still, guess what? Look at this. As the commanding officer of the commander in chief of the Russian military transport aviation says, Vladimir Benediktov, he says in 2020 the flight hours of the military transport aviation, each average is more than 140 hours a year. Wow. Let me tell you, this is transport aviation, isn't it? That is interesting. But Mr. Blinkov obviously begins to pull out those numbers. I don't know from where. I really don't. If he refers himself to how to say it, American intelligence, yeah, he should check his sources, really. Because it's not analysis, it's a bullshit, it's cartoonish and caricature, which he does for obviously monetary gain, to sell merch and, to bullshit all those, fanboys and gamers. But look at this. We can take, for example, just basic calculations, okay? Okay, we have the 140 hours per year for military transport aviation in 2020. I think so it grew by 2021, inevitably. Obviously, Syrian operation and things like that. But if you look at, for example, 6 Air and Air Defense Army, which is the Western Military District, and it actually covers Leningrad. And it's a pretty average, it's near the western borders, obviously. But look at this. If we look at the number of the active aircraft there, most of them obviously are interceptors, fighter jets, like Su-35s, MiG-31s, BMs, some Su-24s. There are also rotary wing aircraft. So we're looking at about, plus minus. Don't hold me, don't quote me completely on that. But I would say we're looking at about 180 aircraft. Don't forget, the army doesn't involve only aircraft. It involves a lot of air defense, involves all other sensors. It's a huge, huge formation. So we have at around 180 of those, including some military transport operations. And guess what we can find here? In accordance to people who command in the Leningrad Army of the Air Force and Air Defense of the Western Military District, it is the flight hours in 2021 were more than 30,000 hours. I don't know how many more than 30,000 hours, but even if you begin to divide it, which is wrong, by the way, you need to divide it by the amount of the number of the combat-ready crews and pilots, but even if you divide it by the number of the aircraft, do you know what you get? You get around 170 hours a year. Not too shabby, but if you will probably get to the real numbers, especially crews of the what is called interceptor and fighter aviation flight, so we're probably looking at about 180, 190 hours a year, which, by the way, probably slightly more than US Air Force flight hours. Obviously, the Chinese having the highest of them all. I believe in 2020, they were, if memory doesn't fail me, something around 200 to 210 hours, which is really, really much. So in this particular case, when you begin to see these numbers, and this is, again, I'm saying it's just very approximate, it's a ballpark estimates, one has to ask the question, why Mr. Blinkov produces this baloney, Well, what can I say? you have to understand, from the start of the special military operation, it was a great start of the huge hype and the opportunity for many people selling all those pictures of explosions and sexy fighter planes to pretend that it is the operational matters and they know tactics, and people bought it. And we have people who now discuss about if the Top Gun, the fantasy, which now in the movie theaters, has any relation to the reality. And believe me, as one of the staff officers, and consider my circle, social and professional circle, and I had few nuclear powered submarines and other submarines, and even admirals among my classmates. So yeah, it's like, why those people do that? Well, they do it because they think they will not be called out. You know what? But I decided to do it today because this Wunderwaffe thinking and a bunch of the unprofessional morons, and especially propaganda outlets, some of them probably have some intel orgs like MI6 or SBU just behind them, spewing this bullshit to people and brainwashing them. I totally understand why people really send me these messages and ask me to, Andre, please, can you respond to this? And then can you respond to that? How can I respond? Sometimes you cannot explain to idiot that he's an idiot because he's an idiot. Those people don't know what they're talking about. They just love the military porn, period. And that's what I wanted to talk about. And it's not a conclusion to my Wunderwaffe type things. I probably will need to make more professional and less, how to say it, PR type thing, and conclude the Wunderwaffe thinking series with something more solid, and I will. But this is my case for you guys today, and this is just to show you that basically 99% and 99.9% of what is there out in the YouTube is complete crap about military operations and tactics. So, and Mr. Blinkov is just one of them, but I was specifically asked several times. Evidently some people go and listen to his basically BS and absolutely amateur crap which he spews there. So I answered it using him, so that's what it is. So, and that will be the end of my talk for you today, guys. And as usual, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel, and those who can afford, please support me on Patreon. Yeah, I depend on you too, guys. So thank you very much, and have the nice rest of your weekend. Bye bye.